Cameron, May, Johnson, Truss, who lasted 49 days, Sunak, Starmer, and now Burnham. That is 7 British prime ministers in 10 years. Not one of them served a full term. This is the fastest turnover of national leaders Britain has seen in almost 200 years. There was no coup, no revolution, no tanks in the street. Each one was removed quietly and legally by the same simple mechanism, a mechanism that is doing exactly what it was built to do. And it all comes down to one question every democracy has to answer. How easy should it be to remove the person in charge? Take the most recent one. 2 years ago, Keir Starmer won a landslide, a majority of 174 seats, one of the biggest in modern British history. This June, he was gone. And here is the strange part. There was no election, and there wasn't even a formal vote to remove him. His own members of parliament simply stopped supporting him after a run of bad results, and he accepted it and walked away. His replacement, Andy Burnham, is stepping into the job this month. Again, with no general election, the public doesn't get a say until the next one, years from now. Now, it would be easy to watch this and conclude that British politicians are just uniquely bad at their jobs. But look at the list again, because it quietly rules that out. 5 of those 7 prime ministers were conservatives. 1 was Labour. The turnover has hit the left and the right, landslide winners and narrow ones, the scandal-ridden and the simply unlucky, all the same. When a problem shows up, no matter who is in charge, that is your clue that you are not looking at a people problem. You are looking at a design problem. So the real question isn't who keeps failing. It's why the system keeps producing this outcome. Here is the fact that turns this from a British story into a design story. Over the exact same 10 years that Britain burned through 7 prime ministers, Germany had roughly 2 chancellors. Same kind of democracy, wildly different stability. The politicians aren't the variable. The rules are. And underneath those rules sits a single, genuinely hard trade-off. You want a leader you can remove when they're bad, but you also want a leader stable enough to actually govern. Those 2 wishes pull in opposite directions. So how does the British system actually remove a prime minister? Not the way most people imagine. Let's walk through the machine. Start with a surprising fact. British voters don't elect a prime minister at all. They elect their local member of parliament, and whichever party wins the most seats forms a government with its leader as PM, which means the person who can fire the prime minister isn't the public. It's the prime minister's own party, the few hundred members of parliament. As long as they back you, you rule. The day enough of them stop, you're finished. Your real electorate isn't 60 million people. It's the room down the hall. Now, the second piece, and this is the crucial one. To remove a leader, those MPs only have to agree on one thing, that the current leader should go. They do not have to agree on who replaces them or on what that replacement would do differently. And that is a very low bar, because agreeing to tear something down is enormously easier than agreeing on what to build in its place. A party in a panic can always agree it's unhappy. It rarely agrees on a plan. So the trigger for removal is simply fear. A run of bad polls, a lost local election, not the arrival of a better alternative. And then the third piece pours fuel on the fire, the voting system. Britain uses first past the post, where whoever gets the most votes in each district wins it. Winner take all. In a system like that, a small drop in a party's popularity can translate into an enormous loss of seats. So when the polls dip, every ordinary MP, the backbenchers, the ones with no government job to protect them, suddenly sees their own seat disappearing. And the fastest way to save themselves is to swap the leader and hope for a bounce. Bad polls create fear. Fear takes out the leader. The new leader inherits less authority and an even shorter fuse. And the whole loop spins faster. Put the 3 together, and the churn isn't a mystery, it's a machine. A leader whose survival depends on a small, nervous group, a bar for removal set so low, it only requires unhappiness, and an electoral system that turns every bad week into an existential threat for the people holding the knife. None of them is corrupt. Each was a reasonable choice on its own. Together, they build a system that quietly optimizes for one thing, replacing the leader on a timescale of months when governing a country takes years. So if you wanted more stability, what could you change? There are really only 3 levers, and each one lands in a different place on that dial between removable and stable. The first lever is the term itself. In a presidential system like the United States, the leader is elected for a fixed term and simply cannot be removed for being unpopular, only for serious wrongdoing, through impeachment, which is deliberately hard. A president can govern straight through terrible polls without looking over their shoulder. The gain is obvious: stability and a horizon measured in years. But the cost is just as real. If you elect someone who turns out to be reckless or simply out of their depth, you are stuck with them. Remember the market turmoil during Liz Truss's 49 days? In a fixed-term system, there is no quick exit from a leader who fails that fast. You have to wait them out. The second lever keeps the power to remove a leader, but changes the rule for how. This is the German model, and it was born from catastrophe. Between the wars, Germany's parliament could throw out a chancellor with a simple vote of no confidence, a bare majority saying we no longer support you. And it did again and again. More than 20 governments collapsed in 14 years, a chaos that helped open the door to the Nazis. So when Germany rebuilt, it added one requirement. Parliament can only remove the chancellor by electing a replacement at the very same moment. You can't just vote to tear down, you have to agree on who builds next. That single rule is why post-war Germany has been so stable that this weapon has been used successfully only once in 75 years. Spain adopted it too. The cost? When the opposition is fragmented and can't agree on anyone, a deeply unpopular government can get stuck in place. The third lever doesn't touch the leader at all. It changes the voting system underneath. Remember, first past the post is what turns a small dip in the polls into a wipeout, which is what panics the backbenchers in the first place. Switch to proportional representation, where seats match vote share, and that dip stops being a death sentence for every MP. So the reflex to knife the leader loses its fuel. The cost is a familiar one. Proportional systems tend to produce coalitions, governments stitched together from several parties at once, and those bring their own instability. Italy, which uses a version of this, has changed government dozens of times since the war. Notice that none of these is free and none is obviously right. Each one buys more stability by giving something up: the ability to remove a bad leader quickly, or the clean accountability of one party in charge. There is no setting on the dial that gives you everything. Here's a detail that makes the whole thing sharper. Britain did once try to add a little stability. In 2011, it passed a law, the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, that made it harder for a government to call a snap election whenever it saw a good moment, fixing elections to a set schedule. It was a break on one kind of political impulsiveness, and then in 2022, Britain repealed it, taking even that break back off. Because the truth is, there's no obviously correct answer here. A leader you can remove the moment they fail is accountable but fragile. A leader you can't remove is stable but dangerous when they're wrong. Every country is quietly parked somewhere on that dial, usually without ever having chosen the spot on purpose. And this isn't really about prime ministers. Any organization, a company, a board, a team has to answer the same question. How easy is it to remove the person at the top? Make it too hard and you are trapped with your mistakes. Make it too easy and no one at the top can ever plan past next week. So where would you set the dial? And do you actually know where yours is set right now?